you can extend that template I made to, or I showed you, to any size goodness of fit. So here I did it for 6 columns, and notice that if I make it for 6 columns, but I only use 3, just leave these blank here. And now notice I made the degrees of freedom yellow because that will have to change if I begin adding things here. So maybe we make this a 0.4 and that a 0.1. So now they add up to 1 again, and that's a 5. So even if this was a 0 here, that would be okay, but maybe, you know, I take 10 of these from here, so we'll put 15 and put 10 in here. Then you know, I have my new problem, but notice it didn't update my degrees of freedom, and I have 4 columns, so 4 minus 1 is 3. I need to change that, and that should change my p-value. So notice it made the p-value go up quite a bit. When that was a 2, it was 0.06, 0.066. But when it's changed to the proper 3, it's actually 0.14. So I made that yellow. If you're going to have a template where you put in different amounts of data, definitely make your degrees of freedom yellow so you remember you need to change that. So that was the goodness of fit. Now, if I do the same sort of thing with the test of independence, well, you know, it looks great. I have this, and here are my data, and I don't have any extra data. And then I use those same formulas to fill everything in, and in the formulas I get zeros here, which because of those zeros there, this ends up saying, oh, you can't divide by 0 because you see you're dividing F13 here, you're dividing by that. Okay, so making the template here isn't quite as nice, but we can fix it up pretty easily with a conditional statement when in evaluating this stuff down at the bottom. And so if I double click on that formula, and I'll need to do this for each cell, so I'll just start here in the top left. What I need to do is check whether there's actually a number up here before I do this calculation. And so if I say if, now that creates a conditional, and by saying if, now that's a function, so I'll just space out so you can see. Well, the first thing I need to do is give the conditional, and that conditional is just this nifty thing that most spreadsheets will allow. It says is number, and I'm going to click on that cell, and what it does is it just checks to see if there's a number there, and if there is, it returns true, and if there's not, it returns false. And so if it's true, I place a comma. So then here's what it does if it's true, and well, I just want it to evaluate the formula I already had. But if it's false, I want it to not put anything here, and so I can do a double quote followed by a double quote. So see that again, it's a double quote followed by a double quote with no spaces in between, and that will just leave an empty cell. And so I hit enter. Nothing looks different there. That's the same thing I had before, but now when I copy down, see, it leaves those 2 bottom ones blank, and when I pull it over, it leaves those blank, and now I don't have the divide by 0 problem. I just have this the chi-square value, but again, my degrees of freedom, I need to update those as I add or subtract data. And so here was a 3 by 3 case, so I had 2 degrees of freedom. Well, if I got rid of one of those columns, now I should have just 2 degrees of freedom because I have 2 columns, so 2 minus 1 is 1, and then 3 rows, 3 minus 1 is 2, so 2 times 1 is just 2, And so I would need to change this degrees of freedom here to get the correct p-value for this particular problem. And so it takes a little more to build a bigger template that you can use for smaller problems, but not a lot more. It's just coming down here and adding that is a number with the if. So is number, and so you can add that. Now if you do that, so here with the yellow it's easy to see those cells are taken. Here it filled in 0, so it's easy to see those are taken. What you might want to do on your template to just remind you that you actually have a formula in all these cells, I probably wouldn't make it yellow, I might make it a very light gray, something like that. And so, right, it looks blank, but if I click, you see there's actually a formula in there. And so making that gray to kind of show that there is something there, you don't want to type over it. You know, so here I have where I put my data, I have my degrees of freedom, I get my p-value, and you know, so it's automated, and I can use as big a template as I want to make, even for smaller problems. And so that's kind of a nice extension.